Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, everybody. Doreen is here there and across the waves. Larry, how you doing? And Larry, don't forget tomorrow, finally, maybe. What time? Oh, yeah, 10:30, yes.
It
tomorrow.
also looks nice. I can wait. I just sat last week.
You can call me.
I'll be asleep till about 10.
Okay,
Okay.
okay.
Right, I have to get the second clone Lynn out
Yeah,
now.
all these Lynn's all over.
Yeah, I have to get I had to clone it in order to make it work.
Okay, let's do an bracha. Hey, Larry. Nice to see you. Hey. Coming with a bang, Larry, comes in with a bang.
At school.
Oh my gosh, we did that the last time.
Oh, the exit of the school
If you
teachers?
go that way.
You have to- And leaving, you have to go the other way.
No, no.
Yeah, you have to go the other way.
They blocked the turn.
Yes,
Yeah.
I know.
Yeah.
It's terrible.
Okay, Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kiddushanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu ma'asot divrei Torah. Amen. Okay, based upon unanimous acclaim, or I don't know, maybe we can take a vote, is that we are going to have one more class after this one. So this is not the end. If anyone plans on going away next week. Okay, because we have much more to do, but we do have to have a limit. I have to have a limit, I think. Anyway, last week, those of you remember, we went through the life cycle and I got a little detoured, which is always good, onto life after death, whatnot, reincarnation, resurrection of the dead, the Messianic period, and also the levels of the soul, etc., which are very good. But I wanted to backtrack a little bit because I didn't get to discuss the part of ritual pertaining to, well, two things, maybe three. Okay. One is the mitzvah of Bikur Cholim, which means visiting the sick. Visiting the sick is one of the most important mitzvot of our Jewish tradition. And of course, we could, Lynn, you're stretching that.
No,
wire
I'm
too
trying
far,
not to,
lower,
yeah.
of course. Okay, you don't want to lose, you lost Doreen?
You don't want a chair?
We didn't lose her, I'll bring her back.
You don't want a chair to sit down and do that?
No,
She's running around here.
thank you.
Okay, so anyway, visiting the sick, we could say, is what some people describe as being a friendly visit. Yes, if someone is ill and you give them a call, yes, it makes them feel better. If it's appropriate to visit in a hospital or a rehab, to show a friendly visit, either because you knew that person or within the Jewish community, is a mitzvah for the community to do this thing. I know at one time Temple Sinai had a committee that does this. We're thinking of doing this again on some level. It is a mitzvah just to visit and show you're there for the sake of the Jewish community. One of the reasons that I'm not patting myself on the back, I think when someone's trying to get in.
Yeah, I've let them in,
Oh, okay,
but they're on a phone, so they're not going to identify themselves.
okay. Lone Ranger.
When you get in on your phone, please identify
So-
yourself for the rabbi.
So the, what should we call it? Oh,
Lila Goldman.
Thank you,
hi,
Lila.
Hey, Lila's here. Wow, good. Okay, so, for many, many years, I visited the Jewish patients in various hospitals in Manhattan and all around my synagogue, at that time on Long Island. And why did I do this? Not only because, definitely not only because I'm a rabbi, but the fact is, that they should know that the Jewish community, cares about them. This became even more important for people in assisted living facilities or in nursing homes, etc., and especially for the elderly, who many quiet times don't have anyone to visit them. And therefore, I believe it is the obligation of the Jewish community to visit on some level. But it's not only an obligation upon a rabbi, it's upon all of us. Because all of us, if you want to succeed in the reincarnation of your neshama, which I spoke about last week, and go through all 25 levels in the spiritual video game of life, you gotta do all 613 mitzvot somehow. So this is one of them. Okay. Now, there is also the opportunity to do what? And the tradition certainly lays this out. And that when someone is ill, you can offer to say what is the prayer called? The Mishaberach, okay? A Mishaberach means me means who, me means who, and Shaberach means to request that you're praying for this person. And he who is blessed, we ask for the prayer to be fulfilled. Now, a couple of things, obviously. One of them is, does prayer really count? Well, first of all, on a psychological level, if you say to a person, well, we're going to say a prayer for you on Friday nights, and if any of you have been in that position where you ask that we say a prayer for you, or someone you know, yes, if the person knows that they're being prayed for by a community, guess what? Does it make them feel better? Sure, because again, the community cares about them. However, interestingly enough, studies have been shown, and the fact is that people who know that a community is praying for them actually improve on percentage-wise, more so than if they are not being prayed for. So therefore, you begin to say, hey, maybe, in quotes, prayer works. What does that exactly mean? No one really knows exactly. I mean, for instance, when I was 50 years or so visiting people in hospitals in Manhattan in the city, and very serious places such as Memorial Sloan Kettering Cancer Center. And one thing I very rarely did, and that is to pray that a person get well, or to, let's say, walk out, or whatever. You don't want to get too specific in the prayer. Why? Because you can get yourself into a lot of trouble. And I remember the story that there was a family, actually, one of the floors that I specialized at Sloan Kettering for those 50 years was pediatrics, and with children with cancer. And I walked into this patient's room, and the mother was very, very upset. She figured that a Hasidic rabbi would do a better job in prayer than I would. Okay, so she got in touch with hi Sheila, come on in. So here, right here. No, you get the couch of honor. Larry gets the couch of honor.
No,
No. There's two chairs here, Larry. There's two chairs on here. That's why. Yeah, take that. Take the recliner and go to sleep.
You're not saying
I will not say I've seen that before. Okay, you just resting your eyes on Friday night. Yes, I know. But anyway, she was very upset because she contacted some Satmar rabbi or whatever in Borough Park, and he came to visit her son, who was very, very ill with cancer. And he left her saying, if you say Psalm such and such every single night for a week, 7 times per night, your son will be cured of cancer on the 8th day. Well, it doesn't work that way. I mean, I will say, is it possible that at the end of 8 days of saying a certain psalm, that a person the cancer could be gone? Well, anything is possible, but on the other hand, to make a statement like that only opens the door to a lot of problems on many different levels, to say the least. I'll tell you a funny story. Lynn's heard this story before from another realm of my rabbinate, and that has to do with bar mitzvah lessons. But it talks about, again, relating to the idea of the power of prayer. Up at B'nai Israel, we started bar mitzvah lessons 7 months before the bar mitzvah, bat mitzvah, and once a month, the child and the family was required to attend services, okay? And there was this one family, actually, the kid's name was Sean, good Jewish name, okay? And his brother's name was Ian, no less, okay? Both mom and dad, nice Jewish people. Anyway, Sean would be dropped off on Friday nights and sit by himself in the temple, and he was miserable. Why? What 13-year-old, or almost 13-year-old, wants to be by himself in the synagogue, whatever? And this went on for like 1 2 months. So I said, this is not good. He's not going to be very happy here, and that's going to affect his lessons, whatever his learning. So I called Mama. So I said to Mom, and I could use first names here because you don't know these people. I called up Terry, and I said to Terry, Sean is dropped off here. What are you and Dad doing on Friday nights? Where are you? And you heard the story?
It happened to me.
Oh, well, no, this didn't happen to you. Okay. Oh, yeah, the response, right, Lynn? No,
Right.
no. Okay.
I hope
I
it
hope-
didn't.
Yeah.
So
So
far.
Terry said to me, well, Rabbi, Marvin works on Friday nights. And I knew that, and I said, well, that's okay, but where are you? She said, well, Rabbi, I go bowling on Friday nights. So I said to her, don't you understand? You're saying, you're giving Sean a very bad message. Basically, what you're saying is temple is for children, but adults bowl on Shabbat. That's not a good message. Well, it's great being the rabbi because you can instill guilt almost instantaneously because that Friday night shows up with Sean. I'm thrilled. I said, well, I'm really a good I get right in there, guilt and go right in for the kill. But anyway, every single week now, not just once a month, every week, Terry is showing up with Sean at services. So I'm saying, well, this is great, but this is like what something's going on here. So at the owning Shabbat, I took Mom aside. I said, Mom, what's going on here? She said, well, Rabbi, let me tell you, that first night when I showed up with Sean, you know when you had the silent prayer thing? I said, yeah. She said, well, I prayed for a better bowling score, and I ended up changing my league to the 11 p.m. league rather than the 7 p.m. league. So I came to temple, prayed for a good score, and that first night my score went up 100 points, just like that. And every week I've been bowling a higher score than I've ever bowled in my entire life, and that's why I come now every week. So I said, well, there you go. You never know how prayer could help you. It's possible. I'm not sure if God is really involved in her bowling score, although there are times when I used to bowl, and I certainly prayed a lot. But going to school didn't help me whatsoever, which is why I hate bowling. I really dislike bowling. However, the fact is, most probably what happened to her is that she came to temple, and rather than running around like a whatever, she relaxed for an hour and a half, and then had a coffee and cake or whatever, and then went bowling, and she was much more relaxed, and that's why she probably got the better bowling score. But the fact is, we don't know the power of prayer. So that there was this, I don't think I've told the story before, maybe I did, is that there was this boy, 14 years old, who had 40 tumors in his lungs and was in a coma. And I was walking the floor on my rounds, and his grandmother came to me and said, Rabbi, can you pray the book of prayers from this book of Psalms for him, which is believed to be a very powerful spiritual tool. So my response always is, of course. So I had a book of Tehillim, of prayers, and I went to his bedside. I was alone with him in the room, held his hand, said who I was and what I'm doing. And I started reciting the prayers in Hebrew. But then what began to happen was my mind took over. And I said to myself, what am I praying for? And I said, well, maybe I'm praying that he awakened from the coma. But that's not going to be of very much help to him because the coma is a way of putting his body out of pain. And he has 40 tumors in his lungs. He should stay in the coma if that's what it is. So I said, well, maybe I should pray that he has what's called a spontaneous remission. There are records of spontaneous remissions where literally one moment someone's whole body is filled with cancer, and then the next day they wake up and they have no cancer. There's no detectable cancer. By the way, a friend of ours up on Long Island who had ovarian cancer, when the doctors went in for the surgery to remove blah, blah, or whatever it was to be removed, they found no cancer whatsoever inside of her. And they call it spontaneous remission. And she had no treatments, nothing. Things happen. But I said to myself as I was holding his hand and saying the Hebrew, can I pray for that? Well, those kind of things happen. You don't pray for them. So then I said to myself, should I pray that he died? In Judaism, would be called passive euthanasia. Euthanasia, obviously, is where you turn a machine off. You do something active to stop a person's life. So whereas passive euthanasia, you're not doing something medically to actually cause that person's death. So that a person, my family, and this person was basically almost in a coma also from cancer. And the doctor came to Judy's mother and came to Judy and myself and said, do you want me to stop the dopamine drip? And she'll pass in about a half hour. And we thought about it, and we said to the doctor, if you don't, what is going to be the end result here? And he said, there's no hope. She's only going to get worse. So he said, please do that. Or my mother, she had Parkinson's and dementia for 3 years, was paralyzed from the neck down. The only way she could communicate was by her eyes for 3 years. And she was constantly getting urinary infections. And finally, we said to the doctor, enough of this, stop treating her with antibiotics. If you don't do that anymore, what will her death be from a urinary infection? The doc said she's just gonna go to sleep. And we said, well, that's fine, enough of that. These would be called more like active euthanasia. Obviously, there's more extremes as well. But however, prayer is allowed. It actually says in the Talmud, and it actually relates back to a story in the Bible about King Hezekiah, that you are allowed to pray for someone to pass, to die, if their suffering, of course, is so very great. And so I was sitting there and saying, well, maybe I should pray that, I don't remember his name, this was about 50 years ago, 45 years ago, but but that would be a prayer. I could pray for him. That would certainly be a benefit to him. His suffering, whatever his suffering is, would be over, and certainly his poor family. You can imagine a 14-year-old. But then it was interesting. My mind went through all of these questions of what to do. Finally, what I said to myself, you know something? The only thing to pray for here is whatever is going to happen to him, may it be for his good. I'm going to put his life and what he's going through into God's hands. When I reached that point and had gone through all of this stuff mentally, all of a sudden my mind quieted down, my thoughts quieted down, and for the first time, I felt his hand in mine and my hand in his, and then I felt God's presence with us, and then I continued reading the Psalms. So the fact is that when we are opening ourselves up to to use an expression, the possibilities, I'll say the power of prayer, but the possibilities of prayer and what they can do on a spiritual level, we actually never know. However, the most important thing there was what? Holding his hand, okay? Because whatever level of consciousness he was at is that he certainly knew that a loving hand was holding his hand.
I have a question, Rabbi. You almost got there, but didn't. Some of us perhaps have experienced similar family, friend, professional relationships wherein there is no treatment to sustain a quality of life. There's treatment to maintain some life, but that's only through artificial means. At what point can you draw the parallel with praying with the person who is ill, holding their hand and giving them permission to let go? And where do we draw that parallel in our Jewish tradition?
Well, in traditional Judaism, again, passive euthanasia is allowable, active euthanasia is not. So in the terms of an Orthodox community, once one would start a procedure, you cannot withhold it. So once a person is put on a ventilator or a heart machine, you cannot turn it off. Because that's active Orthodox, right? That's Orthodox traditional Judaism, because that's active euthanasia. Once you turn the machine off, obviously that person would stop breathing or whatever, and that would cause their death. However, Reform Judaism, as I've been with so many people and at times like this, is that I would say to them, even if they would start the machinery or whatever it is, just like with my parent, my mother, and Judy's mother, if you can understand that whatever decision you make, you have to be able to live with, and you feel comfortable with it. Certainly, Judy and I, this is our parents, all four of our parents died within 5 years of each other, between the years 2000 and 2005. Is that every decision we had to make for all of them, we feel very comfortable because we knew we did it out of love. So that would be my answer to that. But according to Orthodox Judaism, once you start something, you cannot turn it off, even for the sake of transplantation. Was I was thinking of that one?
No, I was going to, you finish your thought now.
So for instance, you might ask the question then, what about the transplantation of organs? Going back into the 1970s, Harvard Medical School, Harvard University Medical School, developed what was called a new definition of death, and that was brain death. Prior to that time, going back to ancient times, is that death was recognized by breathing and by heart rate, which is why some people actually got buried and they weren't dead, because the heart rate and breathing was so very low. And actually, supposedly in certain communities, they actually bury a person with a bell inside their casket. Someone has to be around to hear the bell, but okay, leave it aside, that challenge, to say the least. But they would take a feather and put it in front of the nose or whatever else it is. Well, this was the way that death was determined up until the 1970s, basically. But in 1970s, as medicine and the medical world and science began developing the possibilities of transplanting organs, all of a sudden that opened up a whole new world. Well, under Orthodox law, there is, you cannot go by the definition of brain dead. Brain dead is within a 24-hour period of time. They take 3 EEGs, brain measurements of activity. And if there's no activity over a 24-hour period of time, you can declare the person to be dead, but they're still breathing. You can then take out, they might be on machinery. You can stop the machinery and then harvest the organs, assuming that person signed on their driver's license or whatever, that this is what they wanted to do, right? Under Orthodox Judaism, that is totally forbidden because you are murdering that person according to traditional Jewish law. Reform Judaism said is if for those people who feel comfortable with organ transplantation, it's more of a mitzvah to help other people. So one of my, as all of you know, a couple of weeks ago, 2 weeks ago now, my class of rabbis celebrate our 50th anniversary. One of our classmates died about 2 months ago, Eric Wisnia. So he was in his 70s, similar age group. And I was announced something like he donated like 5 of his different organs to help other people. So that's considered in Reform Judaism, that would be considered a mitzvah. The only transplantation or donation of organs that's allowed under Orthodox law would be what? Cornea transplant of the eyes, or if a person has still 2 kidneys, 1 kidney. Because then the person can live, and obviously transplantation of corneas doesn't affect one's lifespan. But anything else would be forbidden under Jewish law. Alan?
Just as my own personal experience, and by the way, I'm fine with this. With my decision, I look at myself in the mirror and I'm fine. My mother had advanced dementia. I never knew that you can actually, until that time, that on the birth certificate, because of death, it could be dementia. She had advanced dementia, and there came a time where she forgot how to swallow. So she put water in your mouth and it would just dribble out. And the doc, I had the power of attorney, I had all these other things, whatever. And well, I should say she had it and I was. And the doc said to me, we can keep your mom alive, we can just keep her getting IV'd, or you can just decide. Now, so she had been giving water, so I'm just saying stopping it. But for me, in the added part that you didn't address, and I think it's important, is, at least for me, it's also important knowing the person. And okay, my living will, of course, but it's also, I refer to my mom affectionately as Darth Vader, okay? Because she was a tough lady. People didn't like her kindness. I knew in my heart of hearts that if I hooked her up to an IV thing for just water to keep her alive, I would be paid for the rest of my life. Okay, so knowing the person, but would that be considered stopping a procedure? In other words, they could give her the IV. Okay.
If you didn't put the IV in,
Correct.
yeah, that would not be then active euthanasia. That would
But if
simply,
the IV was in, taking the
you
IV
can't do
out,
that. Under Orthodox law, you can't
could
do
not
that.
do that.
Correct. But you're not obligated to start the IV.
Okay.
Yeah, the same way is, and I don't know how many of you have DNR or living wills and all that kind of stuff. You're not obligated to bring anyone back to life, but once you do, and they come in with the paddles and all that kind of stuff and bring the person back to life, then they're back to life. You can't reverse it. That's under Orthodox. Again, in Reform, it's really, again, not to trivialize this at all, and I've been there with my father also had cancer, and that is, you have to do what you feel comfortable with out of the love for the person who's there, hopefully. Okay. When you ask,
I would just say something. Pacemakers. Okay, very interesting about that. You can die with your heart, but you have a pacemaker. So to make that decision to let the person go or not, because the heart is still beating, even though the person is not dead.
Yeah.
So it's a very interesting dilemma that people come across.
Well, having to confront things now, we know, we never had to confront in human history with medicine today and all the technology that they're able to do, huh?
Isn't the issue quality of life?
Well, it should
I
be.
mean, it
Well,
should be. I mean, the decision that you make for a loved one, that person can't eat anymore. I mean, that person is not gonna have any quality of life. And, it's just, it all depends on, I mean, most people with dementia won't have a quality of life either. But when they have to stop eating and they can't drink and I mean, there's no life.
Well, but I
I mean,
don't,
doesn't
I don't,
that to me is the most important thing?
well, but I don't mean to come across the way I probably will come across now. Traditional Judaism doesn't care about the quality of life. Your life is a biological gift from God, and we have no right to end that gift until it ends naturally, whatever that exactly means today. But in reform or modern Judaism, we can make those determinations.
Except, and I know of instances where in Meir Sharim, the Orthodox Jews, if somebody had a heart attack, wouldn't make the phone call to the ambulance. So they're making a decision to let a person die.
Why would they?
Because it's Shabbos.
Oh, well, okay, that's something else.
But I'm saying,
Yeah, because they don't care about the person at all.
that's,
Oh,
yeah, that's
Jewish
what
law,
I'm saying.
yeah, they don't care about
When
it
you
at all.
talk about, Orthodox,
Yeah,
Well, wait a second.
it's not really Orthodox.
I'm confused. So the Shabbos
well, that's
takes
what-
priority over the person's
Yes.
life?
well, but that's not.
But that's
under
not-
but that's not
that's
even
not-
Jewish law. But that's not even.
Wouldn't the Jewish law
Of course.
be to
Of course
put the
it would.
human life
Of
Yeah.
before
course it
Shabbos?
would.
Yeah.
But that's why in part, when the
But some-
rabbi
but
said
some of
all
them are
Jews are Reform Jews, is
But
because
some of them are-
they rearranged the laws.
I had heard once that supposedly the Satmar Rebbe,
even
that's supposedly the Satmar Rebbe's wife, that she had some kind of a medical issue, and her Orthodox Satmar doctor said the only thing your wife can have to help her here is eating bacon, and he actually got bacon for her.
may I interrupt? Did you have a question for the rabbi, Lila, or were you speaking with someone else?
Yeah, no, I had a question. When my husband, my second husband, had a brain aneurysm, and the ambulance took him to the hospital. They put him on life support. They let me know that he was in the hospital. I came there, he was in life support. A neurologist told me they have to keep him on life support for 72 hours. Then I would have the option of either taking him off or keeping him on indefinitely. So I consulted his daughter and his ex-wife and all, and we decided he wouldn't want to live like this.
Right.
So after the 72 hours, we removed the life support. He survived for 5 hours, then he expired.
Yeah, and they did that out of care for him, yeah. And that certainly is, within Reform Judaism or modern Judaism, that certainly is a decision one can make, no question. Under Orthodoxy, that's a little bit more complicated.
And in some Catholic.
But
doctrines-
also, I did live in Rockland County where they had a lot of ultra-Orthodox, every denomination, that from Satmar to Lubavitch to the in between. They felt, a lot of them, that came an accident or life is a thing like one of the guys was saying, they can call the ambulance. They had ultra-Orthodox ambulance corps
Right. I
that
saw that.
came even on Sabbath and holidays, and they took them because they said a life is more important
Sure.
than
Yeah.
Shabbat and all.
Right, when Larry was talking about it in Jerusalem, Meir Sharim, there were some, extreme fanatic groups, to say the least.
in my professional experience in South Florida is that there were a handful of Catholic hospitals that would not under any circumstances remove life support.
Right.
And I don't know if that is still true at
It
a
is.
Catholic
And well, and
hospital.
also about abortion. And that's why I say to certain people, be aware of the hospital that you affiliate with, because theoretically, especially if it's a woman thinking about getting pregnant, because if you enter that hospital and something happens, you're governed by that hospital. And Catholic hospitals are very strict.
We all remember, we're all old enough to remember, I think it's Caroline.
Yeah.
Gordon.
Yeah, definitely.
New Jersey.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, so let me move along a little bit, because I want to get totally into this part. We'll never get to the end of this. And that is, so you have a sense then there are prayers to say. And one of the things that I always appreciated with, even in Sloan Kettering, and there are some pretty terrible and sad situations I was with families, there's always a prayer you can say. You've heard me mention this a couple of times on the Bima. There's a prayer actually called Shinui Hashem, the change of one's name. I mentioned this, I think, 2 weeks ago, that God knows us by our Hebrew names, but also the belief is whatever, that there are evil spirits that know us by those names as well, including the Malach HaMavis with the angel of death. And so for a very severely ill person, there is actually a ritual by which it is said, you can change your name, and therefore the angel of death will not know you and not take you. I've done that ritual a couple of times with people. It's actually a formalized prayer in the Rabbi's Orthodox manual. Interestingly enough, it's almost like informed consent, so I don't get sued. Okay, it says as a part of the prayer, it says, but by doing this prayer doesn't mean that you are going to die, but by doing this prayer, it doesn't mean also that you're going to get well. Okay.
I
It's
changed my name, Hebrew name.
covering the bases, and here you are today. But quite often, for instance, there was an adding of a name. So for a male, quite often, if you ever known someone, not so much these days, but alter is a Yiddish word for meaning older. You're adding years, so alter somebody. Or for instance, you say Chaya somebody. Chaya means life, or Chava. These are names that you add. Or there's also another ritual where you simply open up a holy Torah scroll, take your finger, just open to any column, take your finger and close your eyes and go there, and that becomes your name. But again, in the spiritual realm, talking about Kabbalah and the things from last week about the neshama, in the spiritual realm, if you would say, well, Rabbi, do these things really work? In the spiritual realm, we don't know works or not works, because remember, our soul is on an eternal journey through, at least according to Rabbi Chaim Vital, at least 1,000 incarnations. So the things that we experience in this world as being terrible or whatever, sad, etc., yes, they are. But in terms of the journey of our soul, we have no idea what's happened to us before and what our neshama, our soul, is working through now. There is an organization within the community called a Chevra Kadisha. A Chevra Kadisha means a holy brotherhood. These are, and we could have one here in our temple. You don't have to be Orthodox, although many of them are Orthodox. A Chevra Kadisha would be made up of those from the community who simply volunteer to visit the sick, or like we're doing in Israel now, with building bridges, making calls to see how people are who are not well. And there's certainly enough people in this congregation to be busy all the time, to say the least. But also, when a person does come to the end of life, obviously, a person should not be left alone when possible. And do we have last rites in our tradition? You could ask. Well, sort of, yes. Okay. Before one dies, one should have someone, or if the person who's dying is able to, say the words of the Shema Yisrael prayer. There are other prayers to say, and it can get very involved. But yes, we actually have a confession of sin called in Hebrew a vidui. There are modern confessions of sin in traditional prayer books, etc. There are many different versions of confessions of sin. Some of them you'd think it was Yom Kippur, okay? I don't know how many of you enjoy going to opera, but I love opera And it's amazing because almost every opera is a tragedy, and almost every opera ends with someone dying. And they sing forever and ever and ever. Die already, okay? I gotta go home. Okay, my dinner's waiting for me.
It ain't over
Yeah,
till the fat
I
lady
mean,
sings.
what is it, La Boheme? She's,
La Boheme.
yeah, she's like, I mean, give it up already, right? I mean, endless. She gets, all of a sudden she gets out of the bed and she starts singing again. And first of all, how these people can actually sing lying down is, I mean, I've gone to the Metropolitan Opera in New York City, how they can sing lying down on their back. I can't even imagine the ability of these people, but obviously they're great artists. But the fact is, there is a vidui, a confession of sin, by which obviously we ask God to forgive us.
Is that in the Siddur?
No,
No.
it'll be in other types of books. And by the way, in Reform Judaism, there are modern versions of the Siddur. We can
I
get
have
copies of
several.
yeah, those kind of books. There are handbooks. This is, by the way, what I'm translating from a 17th century Chevra Kadisha manual on their different prayers and rituals to be said when visiting the sick at the time a person is dying, and then when the preparations of the body for burial. And it can get, to say the least, very, very involved. Traditionally, our death is seen as a kapara, as an atonement for the sins we've committed in our lives, and thereby one of the main aspects of traditional Judaism is how our neshama is going to be judged after it leaves the body and continues on its journey. Remember, is it going to go to Gehenna? Is it going to go to Gan Eden? And then what's going to happen to it the next incarnation? Will it be a wonderful person, or will it be a pastrami on the mic? I had to
My
say that.
favorite.
I had to say that, but actually, okay. I like pastrami. I think a person would be doing a good deed for me if they in that pastrami sandwich.
I assure you, I won't be pastrami on rye.
Oh, yeah, maybe, who knows? Anyway, so that therefore there are these various rituals and prayers that can be done. But again, one of the important things of Jewish tradition is the person should, as much as possible, as long as it's possible, not to be left alone. And again, certainly, and some of you might have experienced this with loved ones, to understand that regardless of the state of the person, until the last breath is taken, they are aware of people in the room and they can hear what is being said, etc. A joke. This man is in a coma and he's dying. And of course, all the children, the grandchildren have come to the room. They're all around the bed. And what are they doing? They're arguing about who's going to get what. Boy, we can't wait till Grandpa dies. I'm going to get that thing. I'm going to get the car and the whatever. And all of a sudden, whack! His eyes immediately go open, and he comes out of the coma. So his oldest son is standing close next to him and says, "Grandpa, what can we do for you?" He said, "Get me my lawyer." Okay.
So we have a sit-down comedian, not a stand-up.
So the fact is that a person can hear. The senses are definitely, there's no question, are still operative until the last breath. And obviously we could get into a whole discussion about life after death and the soul leaves the body and the people who feel they come back to life. I'm not going to get involved with that only because it would take me onto a really deep sidetrack. But coming back to this is again that people are there for each other, but also for the person who is obviously dying. When the Chevra Kadisha can come to the hospital to retrieve the body, or obviously in modern times, most people call upon a funeral home to do this. There are numerous rituals involved with protecting the dead, the body itself. Remember from the discussion last week about the soul, the body still has within it a nefesh, a lower level of soul, because it is a biological entity. Did I describe to you the movie To Dust? There's a great movie, it's a short. We saw it at the Boca Jewish Film Festival a couple of years ago. It's probably about a half hour long. This Hasidic guy, his wife dies. And he is very, very concerned because according to the traditional belief, the last level of the soul, the nefesh, cannot begin its journey to the next world until the body totally disintegrates, is absorbed into the earth. And he wants to know how long is that going to take. Did you ever see this movie?
Yeah.
Okay, it's a great movie, it's great. I shouldn't really tell you the ending, but I will, too bad. Okay, anyway, so he's very concerned about this, absorbed, like obsessive. So he goes to a library, asks questions, no one's able to tell him how long. Finally, and oh God, what's his name? Rob, I can't remember the name. Anyway, there's a very famous actor. I don't know why in the world he signed up, but probably needed a couple of
Rob, right?
no, some money in order to get a job or go out to a restaurant or something, because it's really a terrible part. But anyway, he finally finds a professor, a teacher at a local high school, a biology teacher. He's recommended to go to him, and he says, let's go to the library. And he pulls up a book in which it shows pictures of a pig that is being buried and how it returns back to the earth. And actually to study the amount of time it takes for a body to return to the earth, the best biological thing to use is a pig. So in the next scene, this Orthodox rabbi goes and purchases a frozen pig from a butcher and buries it. So he then goes, I gotta look, Matthew, yes, okay, Matthew Broderick. Okay, he's desperate for a farm. Okay. So he finds Matthew Broderick and he says, okay, I did such and such. And Matthew says to him, I forget what his name is in the movie. Was your wife frozen when they buried her? No. So how's that going to help you know how long it's going to take for her nefesh to be able to go on its journey? That's not going to work. You got to get a live pig, kill it, and then bury it, and that's like your wife dying, etc. So the next scene, he's digging up the frozen one. I don't know what he does with it. The next scene, he shows up at Matthew Broderick's apartment with a live pig and said, okay, you're the biology teacher, kill it. Then I'll bury it. So Matthew says, what are you kidding? Anyway, they get into a fight with each other. Somehow or other, a plastic bag ends up over on the head of the pig, and the pig dies. Okay, asphyxiated. So now the two of them are in the middle of the night, are going to a cemetery now to bury the recently deceased pig. And I swear, this movie was made for the following line. The rabbi goes to his car and he says, and so Matthew says to him, what are you doing? And he says the following, I'm getting a blanket because I'm sure that the pig should be buried in the blanket. And so therefore it's a pig and a blanket. I'm sure the movie is everyone who's pig in a blanket. I'm sure that the movie was actually made just for that one line.
Oh, God.
But anyway, it's a very
How old's the movie?
I don't know.
Not old
Maybe
enough.
10 years.
Not
No,
old
I mean, actually, you can see it on YouTube. It's on. You can see it
What's
on.
the name of the movie?
To Dust.
Oh,
To Dust. Yeah. So it's really great how they set the whole thing up. But when he says it's a pig in a blanket, it's like just so funny. So he wraps it in a blanket, and then eventually at the end of the movie, this man finally finds peace of mind to know that his wife's soul is going to its eternal home.
Hi, Ed. Glad
Hi.
you're able to join us. If you want to keep your video off, that's fine. Just want to make sure you're hearing Rabbi.
Ed who?
I'm hearing the rabbi, but I'm getting an intermittent signal. But yes, I
Hi,
hear.
Ed.
Okay. Hi,
We're
Ed.
doing the best we can.
Okay.
Okay, so anyway, is that there are many customs involved with the burial of the body, to say the least, and in terms of even the hospital and whatnot. However, just to move this along a little bit, is that in the funeral home, there is quite often an option, if you've never made it, arrangements you might not be familiar. There's a person that's called a shomer. A shomer, it means a watcher. And you can hire this person through the funeral arrangements to watch over the body, so that the body is never left alone, because again, the nefesh before burial is still in that body. And it is a holy vessel, obviously, that held once the neshama, the higher spiritual elements. And the shomer will sit there and obviously offer psalms and just read them day and night, and that person is compensated not a lot of money, obviously, but to do that. In some places, the shomer is a volunteer through the Chevra Kadisha group. A Jewish burial should occur within 24 hours, according to Jewish tradition. However, I'd have to dare say that today in the modern world, that does not occur very often. I've certainly found that everywhere in New York, it's to be sure as well, but down here in Florida, it's atrocious. The funeral homes and the cemeteries, they don't care. And it's even worse if, God forbid, it's a veterans administration burial. It could be a week or 2 weeks later. And you say, well, I'm Jewish, I'm traditional, whatever, they don't care. This is the way it is. However, as soon as possible, the burial should occur, to say the least. I've had many situations where the burial has actually occurred 7 days later because the son and daughter-in-law were in the middle of the Amazon jungle on vacation. It took about 5 days to even reach them by drum and whatever to notify them that dad died. Okay. So anyway, it
So what's
is,
the big deal if it isn't buried in Jewish law within 24 hours?
why not? I mean, why should it be so fast? Well,
No, what happens if it isn't?
nothing.
Why? should-
Well, the only difficulty is, I mean, obviously, in Judaism, what's it call it? What is it when you preserve the body? Embalming is against Jewish law.
Yeah.
Because, and therefore, but today you have modern refrigeration. So therefore, there aren't the problems that they used to have a long time ago in terms of that.
No, I mean, in Judaism, if you're not buried, is it what happens?
No,
So
no,
like
no.
nothing?
What is the urgency?
What?
What is the urgency?
Psychological. Yeah, I mean, obviously, the urgency was in ancient, pre-modern times, the deterioration of the body.
Right.
And people didn't die in hospitals. There were no hospitals. People, they died at home. And you want to move the process along as fast as possible because of the odors and everything and the disease. There are many, many problems involved with that, certainly. However, within modern tradition, it could be delayed if necessary.
But you're saying the advantages to the living, if you have the quicker burial, it's easier to transition and move
Yeah.
forward.
Most people want to, exactly, most people want to have this behind them, as difficult as it is, and obviously, and certainly many people say to me, well, I really want to get this behind me because I can't really start mourning until so-and-so is buried, and that's understandable, yeah, of course.
Some of these public figures, I mean, a week or 2 weeks and
Oh, yeah.
all this arrangements.
Oh, yeah, well, but they're in a totally different realm than any of us anyway, and certainly most of them not Jewish,
Well, but Jewish do abide by that,
yeah.
yeah. no
Yeah,
matter
they
what.
try to,
Yeah.
yeah. I've had some situations of people I know who live in Israel. Part of the family's in Israel, part is here, and the parent dies who's an Israeli. And the one who's here definitely can't get there in time. And so the funeral's they're not gonna wait for them, unlike I waited for this
Or
family,
people who want to be buried in Israel.
right, or that too.
What is Jewish law in terms of like cryogenics?
Against
Are
it.
these people against it?
Yeah, you can't preserve, the body has to be able to return back to the earth as quickly as possible. And obviously that's why it's forbidden to bury in traditional Jewish law, to be buried in a metal casket, a wooden one only. In Israel, they bury on a flat board. There's no box around, just a flat board. At the cemetery, the Orthodox cemetery, over there in Lantana, they do the same thing as an option to be buried just on a flat board completely.
And what does reform say on that? In terms of quality?
Anything you want. Whatever's meaningful to you, that's all that matters.
If members of this congregation went to Beth Israel, for example, you would be presented with options unless you immediately say, this is what I want. From a sales perspective, the representative of
Right.
Beth Israel may take you on a tour of your options.
When
But-
Judy and I made our options about 2 years ago now, I kind of threw them for a loop because they took me to the casket room. And I said, can I try them out? I want to see how it feels. It's
My
like,
girlfriend,
no, they don't let you go in the
they
casket.
did, they
Wow.
allowed it, it was a while ago,
Yeah.
yeah,
And-
yeah, she tried it out.
And
It's
then
crazy,
it's likely new.
it's crazy the cost of casket.
Yeah, well, let's talk about cremation. On the traditional Jewish law, cremation is forbidden, period. That's it. There's no discussion. Within the modern Reformed community, I would say within the congregation just in Temple Sinai, most people are opting to be cremated within the Temple Sinai community. And there's various reasons. Some people say it's cheaper. Okay, if that's important, all right. Other people will say, well, who's gonna visit me in the cemetery anyway? I'll scatter I have my ashes on the mantelpiece over the fireplace, well, no fireplaces in Florida, or the fake ones anyway. Or scatter them on the ocean or whatever else it is. First of all, understand a couple of things, and I always, when families come to me and say, well, Rabbi, what do you think? I say, it's not a matter of what I think. In a Reform context, again, it's not to trivialize the decisions we make, but rather, I'm just checking, make sure I'm not doing too much, getting away on different topics. I hope you find them all interesting. But the fact is, I always say to them, but what is going to happen to the cremains afterward? Since I can talk about these things with all of you, I don't know how many of you ever seen cremains, ashes, what they're called ashes. Okay, only Carol, okay, a few of you. They are not really ashes. When you're gonna get a plastic baggie, okay, from the crematorium, and there's actually, you can see bone in there. The hip bone does not totally burn up. It's not hot enough to completely burn up. So you'll see part of the hip bone. You'll also see part of the bone back here called the luz in Hebrew. There's part of the bone back here in the head. And so it's not what one normally thinks about it. And then the question is, what are you going to do with it? Unfortunately, my first cousins are still fighting over their father's urn years later. One wants to bury it and the other one says, no, I want to keep it in the closet. And they're both lawyers, which is the problem. Okay, that's the situation. Sorry. Okay. Anyway, but the fact is, that makes it even worse because they're busy suing each other over dad's big, I mean, really.
That's a shame.
Yeah, terrorists.
That's
I never,
terrible.
and I never imagined it with Dan, Larry, and I shouldn't say names, but Irving and Philip, okay? Anyway, two funny stories about,
Before you go there,
what?
if I can, before you go there, so in traditional way, I would think the object is that the ashes should go to the ground.
Well, you can bury remains in a grave in a Jewish cemetery. Obviously, but to do what you're doing, it would be in the urn, would actually be.
Correct.
Well, yeah, but you can't do that.
You
It's
can't,
against the law.
oh,
It'd have to be in a thing,
can you put it in a wooden urn? So it's gonna deteriorate.
maybe. I'm not sure about that part. But there's certain health factors that are concerned because they are human biological things, bones, etc. So for instance, someone in the temple last year passed away, and they wanted to have their cremains scattered out in the ocean. By law, in the United States, at least, you have to go out at least a minimum of 3 miles out. Okay, and Neptune Society does this, whatever, but 3 miles out. Okay,
Ash police?
well, what?
Ashes
Well,
police?
actually, my cousin Larry was against, no, David was the one against doing that.
South.
Because why? Yeah, Sal was against, I don't Sal, my friend, was against doing that, because he said, I don't want to be swimming with, he was in the ocean all the time in Santa Monica, that's where they live in LA. I don't want to be swimming with Dad all the time in the water. I mean, it's really, it get crazy. So anyway, I got a call one day from this guy, from this person. His father just died and he was cremated, and he said, well, Rabbi, will you officiate at a service for Dad as we sprinkle his ashes? So I said, well, if I could be available, because I will do that as a Reform rabbi, as a modern rabbi, yes. I've officiated a number of cremations, before, during, and after. Not
Not
Not before, not before.
close to during, okay. Anyway, is that I said, well, where does Dad want to have his ashes scattered? He said, where he was born. I said, oh, that's interesting. Where's that? 42nd Street and Broadway. It ain't gonna happen. I said, you can't do that, imagine. And then the best one, I don't know if you heard this, the best one is, I'm in a van going to another funeral with his family to New Jersey. And the son-in-law is driving the van and he's not Jewish. And I'm sitting there, it's at least a 2-hour wonderful ride to the cemetery from Long Island. And he said to me, oh, Rabbi, I didn't get to tell you, my mom died last month. So of course, the proper response is, I'm sorry to hear that. Thank you. And he then said to me, well, but my mom will always be very close to me. So the proper response is a yes. And I said this to him, I know Mom will always be in your heart. You'll always remember her. So he said yes, but she's also in the glove compartment. He put her in a Ziploc bag and keeps in the glove compartment of his van because he does a lot of driving as a salesman and he wants to make sure Mom stays with him. That was one of the few times in my life I had no response. I had nothing to say.
But realistically, you could go to a national, let's say my favorite place is a national park. So somebody, my wife takes my remains, goes up to the national park,
It's
and doesn't say anything
Against
to
the
anybody
law.
and buries it in.
That's a good thing for a lawyer to say, it doesn't, everyone's not there.
Well, you know,
If I murder someone and no one knows about it, did I murder anyone?
but really, you know, so if a
Well,
tree
of course.
falls in the woods,
Well, by the way, one of my friends and a colleague in a class that I teach before this one, she is from Denver, and she is involved in green cemeteries.
Mhm.
And a big movement now
Yep.
is to take a person's body and then to make it into mulch, and then you can use it in your backyard to grow things.
There you go.
Okay, there you go. You can do that, by the way, because the mulch is no longer biological elements, it's basically like the mulch you buy in Home Depot.
Oh,
Get
gee, it
colored?
goes from bad to worse. doesn't
Yeah,
it?
so if you want to be mulch,
Red.
call Holly Blue, that's her name, Holly Blue, yeah. I forget her last name, I don't even know her last name, no, Holly Blue Hawkins.
Really?
Yeah, she's very much involved in the green burial movement in Judaism, which is a growing movement for environmentalists.
You don't want.
Yeah, I mean, burying this wood casket, all these things is again, not helping the environment. But if you were to be blenderized into a mulch,
The grass really grow better.
yeah, well, maybe.
Grass is
I think I'm
always-
Might we go in a different, might we go in
Yeah,
a
it's okay.
different direction?
Now we're going, continuing. So leaving aside this part of things,
Oh,
is that you're now at the funeral. Again, there are many, many rituals. The two basic prayers for a person, and by the way, and I'm not putting myself out of business theoretically. However, you don't need a rabbi to officiate at a funeral. You just have to know what you're doing, okay, in that sense. Just to know the prayers. But the two basic prayers at a funeral are El Malei Rachamim prayer, God who is full of compassion, now dwellest on high. It's not required. If you left it out, it's not as if the person wouldn't be dead or whatever you could imagine. But the fact is, it's traditionally said at the funeral. But the other prayer, and there's two other prayers, however, which in traditional Judaism are essential. One is called Tziduk Hadin, which means God, the righteous judge. And there's a whole series of prayers, and some of the quotations are actually from the Song of the Red Sea that we're going to be singing in 2 weeks from, not this Shabbat, but the following. Proclaiming God to be righteous in all that God does. Because we went at the time of a funeral, regardless of how tragic the death is or not, doesn't really matter. We want to affirm that there is justice in the system and that what is not worked out in the world in which we live will be in the world to come. And obviously the world to come is infinite, whereas our world here is a finite existence. As hard as this is to do, that is why in traditional Judaism, when you hear of the death of a person, the response words would be Baruch Dayan HaEmet, which means God, the truthful judge. Because it means that even when we cannot, someone was talking on my class before about one of the tragedies of the hostages and what they've gone through, etc., the horrors there. To be able to say Baruch Dayan HaEmet in front of such horrors, or the Holocaust, or all these terrible things, what happens to people, how do you do that? But within Judaism, whether we can accept it rationally or not is irrelevant. The tradition doesn't say, does this make sense to you or not? The tradition says to us, we must affirm our faith and belief regardless of what we are experiencing. Well, that's very interesting. On the traditional Judaism, a person in mourning for the first 7 days, the days of Shiva, because Shiva means 7, is exempt from performing all mitzvot. You are not obligated at all to say any prayers, to do, and if you're Orthodox, to do anything ritually or any way whatsoever. And the reason is because it recognizes sometimes you're just angry at God. And guess what? It allows the person, the mourner, time to be angry at God and not talk to God, which is what prayer means, obviously, which is very interesting.
I have a Shiva question. When or where or for what reason in progressive Judaism did the shift to 3 full days of Shiva? Was there, other than the world goes on around us?
Yeah, or people don't want to confront the grief. They don't want to be put out of their way. But yeah, we got things to do. We don't take the time. we need to allow ourselves, people who have a loss need to allow themselves time to grieve, to go through the process. There are many, many psychological studies that could be quoted.
Mhm.
There's healthy grieving and there is unhealthy grieving. And a part of the process is to understand that a loved one has died and then begin to move on from there, whatever that means somehow. But for some people, that's very difficult. I think I might have mentioned this. Up north again, since obviously many of my experiences come from almost 50 years of experiences there. There was this family, a wonderful family, and this is like 40 something years ago. And it was a Memorial Day weekend, and Dad was barbecuing, and son Ian was over at a friend's house, but he went to his friend's house on a motorcycle. And Dad called his son up, Ian, and said, "Ian, you're gonna be late for dinner. Get over here pronto." So Ian jumped on his motorcycle, backed out of the driveway, and got into the street, and a car went right that way, and Ian was murdered immediately.
Oh,
For the
God.
next 20 years, Dad visited Ian in the cemetery every single day for the next 20 years. Because he was so filled with guilt
Huh.
out of because, he blamed himself. Okay, and you could say, you say anything you want to him, it doesn't make a bit of
But
difference.
in the Reform Rabbinate, was there at any point a couple of years of back and forth with responsa? No, we should stay with the 7 days? Did that
That I-
happen within your 50 years?
With all of us, yeah, no, I mean, people, there are many reasons, and I think many of them have to do with the psychological, as well as unfortunately, many of the traditions lost their meaning.
Okay,
As well as today, I don't know, assuming all of you have lost someone in your family, and how many of you have sat 7 versus 3 versus 1? Shiva today is not what it's supposed to be either. Unfortunately, Shiva becomes in many families an experience of a party, and therefore, what's the point of it all? Who needs it? And therefore, people say what's the point of it all? Let me just get back to doing or try to, But I want to get back to a couple of things though before I move on with that. The third prayer, there's Amale Rachamim, Sidu Kadin, and then the third one is, of course, what? Kaddish. Okay. And some of you heard me say this before. Kaddish is a very interesting prayer. When Kaddish was created, developed in 2,000 years ago during the rabbinic period, it was said by students after studying and a way of giving thanks for their teachers who taught them, who are no longer living, but through their teachings, they still live. Later on, it became associated then with anyone who's died and is now a part of our lives. But the Kaddish prayer says nothing about never use the word death at all, because it is a celebration of life. There are many different rituals even to Kaddish, obviously. You'll notice in the Kaddish prayer that some people in the last of the paragraphs, Osei Shalom, this is called Jewish choreography. I'll teach more about this next week when I talk about the prayer service. But you'll notice they'll go something like this. Osei Shalom, Birmer Av, U Yasei Shalom, or Leinu V'al Kol Yisrael, Bimaru, Amen. If you understand and believe that the presence of God, whatever this means, before you, you are taking steps back at the end of the prayer. Quite often, aside from the funeral service, when is Kaddish said? At the end, it's the last prayer in services before Ein Keloheinu, or say whatever it is. Okay, so at the beginning of services, how did we begin? Baruch the bow from God's presence. Well, how am I going to end the service? Oh, say Shalom, Bimro Mav. I'm saying goodbye to God, and God is everywhere. Who Yaseh left? Shalom, Oleinu, V'al Kol Yisrael, Bimro Amen. But why do I take one step forward? Because I really don't want to leave God's presence. I want to give God a hug before I go about the rest of my day, or I'm leaving. So that there is a choreography as well, and some of you might have noticed that at services or seen other people do that.
Will we ever say it in English? It's a beautiful prayer in English, and we don't really understand it.
Well, in my congregation up north, there was one person who insisted every single service you do the whole prayer in English also, and it just adds more time to the service. But I wouldn't do it in place of the Hebrew. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. By the way, the prayer is not in Hebrew; it is in Aramaic, which is the spoken Hebrew 2,000 years ago when the prayer was created. And so therefore you could say now you know another language, Aramaic. Okay, so anyway, that is the funeral service. Again, there are so many rituals involved with all of this. In terms of placing of the dirt upon the casket. It is our obligation to care for our dead. We shouldn't be paying other people to do that. So that if you've been to a traditional burial, obviously the workers at the cemetery will dig out the grave. However, the participants in the service will fill the grave in until the entire grave is covered over. Traditionally, as long as the casket is covered over, then you could leave. Unfortunately, in the way the world works today, first of all, you don't always have enough people around to be able to fill it in. You don't have enough people who are capable of filling it in. It's not easy. I'm not talking about emotionally. I'm talking about just physically being able to fill a grave in. It takes a lot of work, okay? But the tradition says it's our obligation to care for the dead. Certainly in pre-modern times, especially going to Eastern Europe, you also had other problems of grave robbers and all kinds of things. One of my first funerals goes back to 1971 or 2, I guess it was. It was a 13-year-old girl who died of cancer, Sloan Kettering, and the family asked me to officiate at a funeral. And with me standing there, we lowered the casket. The parents, they had to leave. They just couldn't do the dirt thing. If you've been to a funeral, the sound of having that dirt on the casket just shakes you. But why? Why do we do that? First of all, number one is it's our obligation to care for as we cared for when they're alive, it's our obligation to care for them when they're dead, when they died. But the other fact is that that sound, of course, is so harsh. However, with me standing at the funeral, at the cemetery, the family walked away. I was the only one left. And mom had placed upon the casket an envelope with a rose in it. The casket had been lowered down to the ground. With me standing there, the 3 cemetery workers said in front of me, I wonder if there's money in the envelope. Let's go down and check it out. And I said, put that dirt on their name. I am sure that if I wasn't there, they would have done that. Okay. And the Middle Ages, they did those things because that person must be buried with their wedding ring or jewelry. Oh, those Jews are so wealthy. There must be kind of stuff, gold in there, God knows what. Who knows? As well as stealing and also stealing organs in those days for witchcraft and other kinds of things.
Did somebody on screen have a comment or a question?
So anyway, going back a little bit in time, the body arrives at the funeral home. There is there's the funeral people that the director, etc. They can obviously prepare the body for burial. However, the Chaver Kadisha can also do it, fulfilling an important traditional ritual called Tahara, or the ritual preparation of the body. There is a very, very involved ritual process in which members of the Jewish community participate in preparing the body Jewishly for burial. This is always an option for Jewish families to do it. Does it cost extra money? Yeah, okay, not a lot, I don't think.
And do you have a question?
Okay.
Okay.
But the money is irrelevant. If you feel that this is what you want to be done either for yourselves, make sure your family knows it. If someone requests it, or to say some families say, well, dad would want it. Okay, then it's a proper Jewish thing to do. There's a certain procedure of washing the body, preparing it, removal of any impurities and cleaning the body, preparing it. There's prayers that are said all along the way, because as I explained to the group that I teach at 1 o'clock, because all of these are members of Chaver Kadishas on the West Coast, either in California or Colorado or Portland, and that is that they are not only washing of goof, a physical body, but also the washing the soul for its journey.
Now, if the family doesn't do it, does the Jewish funeral home do it?
No, you have to request it. You have to request it, or they'll ask you do you want Tahara done, and you say yes. You say no, obviously they can't. But if you don't say anything, they will not do it.
My father was 91 when he died. And 6 years before he died, his leg was amputated. He was Orthodox. special precautions to make sure the leg went. with him.
Yeah, oh, in the casket?
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
oh, because there's also another, in some, in many of the traditional Jewish cemeteries, there's a place for the burial of limbs, with the hopes that when the Messiah comes and the body is resurrected, hopefully all the right parts will go to the right parts or something. It's
Yeah, I
very,
gotta tell just a quick story.
Kind of more-
Good friend of mine, ER nurse, very, very busy hospital needs. Comes in, 3 elderly people died. They died, you take their teeth out. Take teeth out, put that out. Now the family wants to see them. She goes, I don't remember which teeth they put in.
Ah.
I don't remember where they belong. She puts it in, family comes with it. That's not my mother's teeth.
Ah.
And she goes, well, how about these?
Oh,
my
Which ones?
well,
Oh, God.
Oh, that's the reality
yeah, well, of
of
course.
what happened. So I wonder.
Oh, no, no,
Yeah.
they're
Well,
very specific, they're very
Yeah,
careful
yeah.
about. Well, small town, Toledo, Ohio.
Well, Orthodox Jews will actually say the nail clippings, because a part of their body, and bury them with that too. It's a little, to say the least, a bit extreme. Yeah. But anyway, the idea of the resurrection of the dead, which I talked about a little bit about last time. Carrie, you have a question?
No, that's
So, there are very, very specific rituals in Tahara, and then a person with Tahara, man or woman, is buried. By the way, women can prepare male bodies and female bodies. Men can only prepare male bodies and not female bodies. For those men, okay,
Good to know.
You never know.
you never know, exactly. And obviously, you can imagine the Chevra Gadisha groups had a lot of challenges during the pandemic. And actually, they started doing what's called virtual Chevra Gadisha work, because they couldn't go into the rooms because so many people died of COVID in the early years, the early time of COVID. They had no idea what in the world is going on with that. But it's interesting how being involved in these things really brings about a very important Jewish understanding, and that is, just as we are born, all of us are going to die. And life and death are simply parts along the way of the same spectrum of life. And obviously, we view them very differently, but in truth, they're not. And just a part of, and our body is only an infinite, a finite vessel for our infinite neshama, for our infinite soul. Many years ago in the 1970s, I became very involved in an organization called the Foundation of Thanatology, which means the study of death. I was very involved with that organization. A couple of books have my chapters in them and stuff, articles I wrote. And I spoke at a number of their conferences, which were sponsored by the College of Physicians and Surgeons at Columbia Presbyterian Hospital. And there was this woman, I'll never forget her, Lois Jaffe, she should rest in peace. Lois was a social worker from Chicago, and she was dying of breast cancer. And she actually allowed herself to be interviewed and studied by over 20 different disciplines as to what it is to face one's death. And what an extraordinary woman to go through hours of interviews. This was ultimately became a documentary movie, and also a book of all of our interviews are published in the book. And it turned out to be that I was asked to interview her as the rabbi, and from the Jewish perspective, because she had a psychiatric person, a social worker, and a doctor, and all these people. And it turned out to be that the question I asked her was critical for understanding what Lois was doing. Because my question was there anything in your past, in your Jewish life, that enables you to do now what you're doing, which is not easy at all? And she thought for a few moments, and she said, yes. I grew up in a small town in Pennsylvania, and my family was a member of a Chevra Kadisha. And my parents would take me and watch them prepare bodies for burial. And so it wasn't something that was so foreign to me, death and deterioration and illness. It was all a part of my growing up years. It was a part of my life. And so I didn't see it as something so alien and something so horrible. And so I'm able to face it because I know it is a part of that continuum from birth to death and beyond. So being involved in these things, thinking about these things are not depressing as long as you understand the perspective that they offer. So anyway, a person is buried. I always say at the funerals that I officiate at, that at least the first person putting the shovel of dirt upon the casket should do it 3 times to cover the 3 levels of the soul, nefesh, ruach, and the neshama. And you never hand the shovel from one person to another. You put it back in the dirt because you're not supposed to hand grief from one person to another is the traditional thing about that. When you get to the Shiva house, everyone receives a Shiva candle. It is a 7-day candle. It burns for the Shiva for 7 days. What Lynn was talking about before, so many people today don't sit 7 anymore. Even Orthodox tradition designates between 3, 7, 30, and 11 months. Okay, there are different restrictions in a traditional setting. So during the first 3 days of Shiva, and you think about it, they're the most intense. Again, when my sister's 17-month-old baby died in his sleep, those days were beyond horror, beyond horrible, beyond consolation of any sort. Actually, about a year to get, and he began to move a little far from this. But it says in the tradition during the first 3 days of Shiva, you're not supposed, the person in mourning is not supposed to greet people. Hi, Larry. But Larry is also not supposed to greet the mourner. You just go in, offer a hand, offer a hug. Sometimes saying nothing at all, especially in a very tragic loss, like with my sisters, to give an example, is the best thing to do. Because guess what? Sometimes there are no answers. And guess what? Like in her situation, what are you gonna say? What can anyone say?
No wonder there.
No. By the way, it's very interesting. In some traditions, there are some things that are comfort, but not in our Jewish tradition. I remember in at Sloan Kettering, and there was a Jewish mother whose child was dying, and this Catholic mother was talking to her and said to her, and I heard this firsthand, well, you shouldn't be really too sad because you know something God wants the land.
Picked up your other hearing aid?
Yeah.
Very
Great.
comforting. In a Jewish one, probably not. Who knows? There's a very famous story from the Talmud of a rabbi. Oh God, mine's going. Anyways, wife's name is Beruria. No. Oh, anyway, he's out and about doing rabbi things, and during the course of that day, his 2 sons died, and he comes home, and his wife, and he says, "Where are so and so and so and so?" And his wife Beruria said to him, "Sit down, please. I have something I have to tell you and something I have to ask you." And he says, "Well, what is it?" And he said, "Well, let me ask you a question. Let's say, for instance, someone comes to you, a jeweler, and the jeweler comes and lends to you 2 magnificent diamonds. And then one day the jeweler simply comes to you and says, I want to take them back. Would you give him back the diamonds, or would you keep them?" And he said, "No, on the Jewish law, I'm obligated to give them back to him. I can't keep them, they're not mine." And so his wife, Beruria, then said to him, "Well, today, God took back your children, who are the jewels that you had, and they're no longer, now they're back to God. And I hope that you can give them back to him as well and accept that." A very tough thing, right? Yeah, yeah. So that the stories, to understand them, how powerful they are, right? Yeah. And so, can we find comfort in these stories? I don't know. But certainly, they enable us to, another story about King David. One of his sons was dying. And day and night, he sat with his son crying. And then his son died. And then all of a sudden he got up and started being a king again. And the people in his court said to him, what is that all about? They said, "Well, when my son was ill, I sat by his bed. I didn't eat, I didn't sleep because I thought it could help. But, well, he did pass. But guess what? I got to go on with life. I got to go living. I have to get up again and return to life." And so there are many stories within our tradition that can help us during these difficult times and give us strength to go on. And that's the beauty of what? Of our tradition. And so now the person during Shiva, of course, the first 3 days, you don't say hi, you don't receive greetings as well. During the next fourth day to the seventh day, the person who's in mourning can't say anything to anyone, but they can say something back to him, and it goes on, because it's very complicated. As all of you know, if you're in mourning, you're not supposed to shave, you're supposed to wear slippers, so you're not walking about and going anywhere. In other words, all the traditions are here to mark the fact of what? That life stops during the period of loss, and it's okay. The community comes in. They will say the prayers morning and evening in a minyan. They will bring in food to support the family. They will say, you know something, your life has stopped, and we are here to what? To pick you up and to help you and keep you going, right? And that's the beauty of community, especially at a time like this. And so you can see how all of these different rituals are so powerful, recognizing the need of the mourner, but also enabling spiritual strength to the person who has passed away as well. Yes, you.
What about the ritual of when you finish Shiva, you have to walk around the block?
Well, if you have a block, yeah, around here,
Yeah.
no blocks, yeah, around your condo. Barracks, I call them barracks. But anyway, the fact is it represents a beginning. Circle represents endings and beginnings that no end to keep on going. And by the way, there are other rituals, like for instance, lighting the Shiva candle. I think I mentioned that last days for 7 days.
What about the small chairs?
Well, oh yeah,
I-
so the benches, right. In traditional Judaism, they used to give you these little wooden things, okay? They were so uncomfortable, your back was killing you after a couple of days, no one could sit, there's no back, right? The idea is you're stopping yourself from doing your normal thing. In traditional Judaism, Orthodox Judaism, you cannot allow to shower for 7 days. You can wash your hands and wash your face, but you're stopping everything.
My only thought was, if you're already grieving and you're miserable, I make the person feel more.
That's why I always say, if you have a bad back, don't do that.
The physical pain will make you forget some of the mental pain.
Yeah,
But I have a question. Shabbos interrupts Shiva,
correct.
but if a holiday comes in the middle of Shiva, Shiva ends.
Correct.
Now, since Shabbos is holier than everything but Yom Kippur,
Mm.
why is it
It doesn't end it.
that, well, Shabbos comes every week, so.
Yeah, we can do that.
But why does another holiday end the Shiva period?
Because if you think about those holidays, they call for for an Orthodox family, they call for such intense preparations, and while you're in the holiday of such important concentration, you have to blot out everything else from your mind in terms of the death. But of course, is it possible? Not really.
No, I know, I was just always curious
Yeah.
because
That's why.
I
More
mean,
practical than anything.
my mother died, and was buried just before Shmini Atzeret.
Yeah.
So really, I had a 2 hour,
Yeah.
My father passed, I had the normal 7 days.
Yes, my father died, I think my father died 2 days, no, my mother died 2 days before Rosh Hashanah. Yeah, and that day I went on the pulpit, I was a rabbi again for the days, and I did all my stuff because that's what tradition says, and I was able to.
I was always curious.
And for her, it was a
But
relief.
Why the holidays ended the Shiva?
But when we say holidays,
Next, I'll call back,
but,
it back,
but
shit back.
when Larry says holidays, it's only the Hagim, it's not Hanukkah or Purim.
Rosh
it's
Hashanah,
the
Yom
Hag-
Kippur.
And the
and
Hagim,
Yeah,
yeah,
the
the festival.
You're not
I
home.
have interesting thing. So I know my husband was buried right before Yom Kippur. It started to
No.
So basically, no Shiva. So
Correct.
what is that? What is that for a family? It is.
It is
Okay,
what it
see you
is.
later. Goodbye.
It is what it is,
Oh,
yeah,
wow.
you're right, it's bizarre, especially if it's a difficult death and you need to grieve and mourn. This is traditions, that's what it is,
It was
yeah, and I can't, because I definitely was not brought up in traditional family, so I can't say how does traditional family confront these things. They have emotions, they have sadness, I don't know,
kind of interesting.
yeah.
I'll share my experience that I've told Rabbi. My husband passed several years ago. And I worked in a Jewish organization. And on the third day of Shiva, I received a call from the director, you need to come back to work. And I said, I observed 7 days. I'm not coming back to work. You have no choice. It does happen.
Wow.
What'd you do?
What'd you do?
I had to go back to work
Need the money.
because, no, not, and went back to work, had nothing to do with finances. There was a big transition in the program in which I was a director. And I basically had to welcome the new organization that was taking over the project. And there were no options.
No good.
Yeah.
So
Well,
those
there's-
things do happen in our Jewish lives.
But again, it's a matter of Reform Judaism, how you, makes sense to you? And how you, to deal with any of these things which I've discussed today. And I said this a while back, and that is, that to me being, leave me alone. I never heard this name before. Okay, and that is, it's more challenging to be a Reformed Jew because it would be easier for me to say, this is what you do, this is what you don't do, and that's the way it goes. You don't like it, that's the way it goes. But here in Reform, we hear all these different kind of things, and we say, well,
Betty.
and
Hi, Lynn. Lynn, hi.
Hi, is that you, Ed?
Yes, that's me, Lynn.
Oh, did you have a question for Rabbi?
No.
Oh, okay.
I'm a listening today.
Okay, Ed, thank you.
Ourselves. Oh, so anyway, let's see what I'm up to. So
It's harder.
oh, yeah, that, yeah, hard, but see, to make all these decisions, and again, you have to really go with your feelings, what makes sense to you, and then obviously, with family and other people in your life, and then not to make any decisions in isolation, but you have certain things which you have no other recourse, but to go along.
But Rabbi, for me, while that's a very comfortable thing and I get it, in today's society, it's sometimes that philosophy somehow rubs me the wrong way because it's like whatever you like most people out in the world tell me it's what I want to do and don't tell me what's right. I can do whatever I want to do. Somehow it would seem that there should, I hate to use the should word, be a baseline. That you can do a little bit more, but to say, I believe in 2 hours, okay, as a Shiva, to me, I could either respect what you're saying, it's 2 hours, but for me, I'm still gonna walk away with my own thoughts saying, that wasn't a good decision.
Well, but
I'm not gonna say that.
yeah, well, the problem is in the modern context, how does that really play out? So for instance, if you were to say to me, well, someone's passed away in my family and I'm gonna only sit 1 day, is that okay? For me, I would have to say, well, if that's what you wish to do. But again, Jewish tradition says such and such and such and such. In Reform Judaism, a rabbi is a guide. Not to say whatever you want to do is okay, but the fact is the choices are still there to do nothing at all. And I've had a number of situations, of course, people don't sit Shiva whatsoever. And you know, there's not even in Temple Sinai. They don't sit Shiva whatsoever. Nothing at all. I can't, as a Reform rabbi, I can't, well, for an Orthodox rabbi, I wouldn't say to them they're committing a sin, but the fact is, what are you gonna say to such a person? You're doing the wrong thing? They don't care. What's the real world? If they were to ask me what is my opinion, there is a very strong and important psychological value to sitting Shiva, to spending time evaluating, to reflecting upon the loss, and people coming to visit should be there to talk about and reminisce about the person who's passed away. That's what you're supposed to do. And it's not supposed to be simply another night to have a party with friends, unfortunately, which is what it gets to sometimes.
May I? First day of September, my 104-year-old aunt passed away. She was observant all her life. She had no children. Her instructions were no Shiva. No children, no Shiva. At the funeral in the chapel, her rabbi said, no shiva. My rabbi said to me, it's your choice. And I didn't host a shiva at her home because that was her wish. On the other hand, we had a member that passed away that same time period. And Rabbi said to me, can you do the Shiva Minyan one of those nights? I said, of course I can. I'm doing it for a family that I've known here. And as I was doing that Shiva Minyan with the family, part of me was thinking about my aunt because it was so fresh in my head. But her rabbi said, he pointed his finger. You're a niece, no Shiva.
Yeah, but you can do what you want for yourself.
I prayed.
Yeah,
No,
yeah.
well,
I said Kaddish for her.
my sister, my grandmother's sister, Lena, they lived together, plus my grandfather, so it's three of them living in this Brooklyn apartment for like 60 years or something. So obviously my grandmother and her sister were very, very close to each other. My grandfather died when I was 4 years old, so he was out of the picture for a long, long time. And anyway, when Lena died, my mother sat Shiva for her great aunt. Under Jewish law, she had no children. She was never married. But the fact is that under traditional Jewish law, sadly enough, no one sits Shiva for, no one mourns for her. No one sits Shiva for her. You can't even say Kaddish for her. But in Reform Judaism, the option is there. So it's not a matter of being able to do anything you want. You should is, again, I think I said this at the very first class we had. And that is, there are two kinds of Jews. I don't care what type of yarmulke they wear or don't, what tzitzis they wear or don't. There are serious Jews and there are non-serious Jews. I know Orthodox Jews who are non-serious. They just go through the motions and nothing behind it. They just do, okay? However, a serious Jew is one who just doesn't do anything because they feel like it. I use that word, I shouldn't have said that. But rather they've studied, they understand what's involved, but ultimately they make the decision because as a modern Jewish person, we have that God-given right of self-governance. But hopefully we do it with respect for tradition, for Torah, and for God. And if we can do that, then at the end of our lives, we can say we've lived a good Jewish life, whatever that is. How do you make those decisions? I didn't even talk about kashrut. I did talk about it a little bit, I think, right? Yeah. But the fact is, if you go to a restaurant and you eat lobster, as a serious Reform Jew, you don't eat lobster because simply you like it. But rather you've thought about the fact is, what are the laws of kashrut? Why shouldn't you eat this? Why should you eat that? And ultimately you might say, no, something I'm just not ready to take that step right now and not eat lobster and not eat shrimp and whatever. But the fact is you've thought about it as a Jew. You've gone through the process of study and thought because that's what is to be a Jew.
Last, you're talking about the soul and your grandfather and people that. Can you have more than one soul in you?
Yes.
What I was wondering about.
Multiples.
How does that feel?
Yes.
And how do people know that? Like, how do you?
Well, you can't know it unless, well, this sounds like a yogiism.
Yeah.
You can't know it unless you know it. Okay. So if you didn't know that Judaism believes in reincarnation, you would know to know that you might have it. But as my rabbi, Eliyahu Shir, my Kabbalah teacher in Jerusalem, has taught me, if let's say, for instance, there's some, all of a sudden, wow, how am I able to do that? And you could say, wow, that's amazing, and you do it. But on the other hand, if all of a sudden you were to say, well, maybe the fact is that so-and-so, somebody has now attached itself to me, my soul, and enables me to all of a sudden have this insight into something that I never thought I would ever have in my whole life. Then all of a sudden it's awakened. But you have to know to think that way, otherwise you would not think that way. So obviously for me, when I look at that picture up there and being able to talk to you about these things that I do, I don't know where it comes from. And I've said this before to you, based upon my upbringing, I should not be here. I should have gone to business with my father. He was in the music business. And
I've heard you say.
recording. Yeah, no, not that part of it. He was in manufacturing. And manufactured records. Remember records and stuff like that. But anyway, but the fact is, I did what I did because I do believe that he influenced me. And the same way my facility with this one book that I can have some facility with from the 17th century is because I do believe part of Aaron Barretti is in me.
So the journey of the soul, when they decided where to go, then they could inhabit,
To help us.
they could share.
Right, it's called in Hebrew, the word is ibor, which means actually to be impregnated. As I mentioned by the way, anyone interested, my Zohar class is moving along nicely, 9:30 on Saturday mornings. We've got a dozen people or so coming to class. And the Kabbalah is filled with sexual terminology. So you're actually being impregnated by another soul.
That's banned in Florida.
You're not that far,
Oh.
not Palm Beach County.
Not his
But-
house.
Yes, but, and the Hebrew word, Carol, is ibor. Spelled in Hebrew, ayin bet resh, but Ibbur, ibor. So, my dears, yes,
I have, and you may have to postpone answering, or you may not be able to answer it. But I've experienced recently.
why don't you ask him on the wall, face him and, no.
Oh, well, I know, because this is
No,
a
only kidding.
new topic. Is transgender,
Yes.
okay? Now, just this week experienced the fact that my cousin, they were very orthodox, that he was married, but they got divorced, and they got to get the whole thing. But now I found out that their daughter, Dina, is now, was Phoenix, that transitioned.
Oh.
And they were doing Shiva and the whole thing, but I didn't know, like, that, what, I don't even know the question. I was just very surprised that a very religious group, they were very religious, that they went through this, they embraced, I guess it's now he. I don't know, I mean, what is the, not even reform or, I know, it's just, to me, I don't know how we,
Who is sitting Shiva?
my cousin,
For the woman, for the girl? I mean, when he was a girl.
oh, right, it
So
was
for-
originally Dina, but then became Phoenix. And they claimed they were sitting Shiva for Phoenix. They didn't say they were sitting Shiva for
Like,
Dina.
for the new personality?
Yeah.
They were sitting.
Well, the new transition, it wasn't just personality.
No, I know,
They-
but
That wasn't accepting. They
And then the
feel
person-
that wasn't accepting then.
But then when the person became what they now are, they're now accepting it?
That's
Oh,
my understanding.
Yeah, but not if they're sitting
I don't know
Shiva
about
for
mine
that
is-
personality.
It's sitting Shiva.
oh, well,
I don't, I just am
That doesn't
so
sound-
like
They're
blown
embracing.
out of the water
Are
about
you
this.
sure you got your facts straight as to who you said should have?
Yeah,
Yeah,
well, they're not embracing the new
maybe,
personality.
well.
We don't know.
We don't know.
We
we don't know, I mean, you know,
We
like,
don't know.
Orthodox Judaism does not accept any of this.
okay, that's what I thought.
How could they?
So bizarre.
Because homosexuality is an abomination, it's a sin against the Torah even, so they're not gonna accept that.
Oh, God.
What?
Barry, you got.
On the Orthodox, yeah.
I mean, I have a cousin who said Shiva for his.
Not in
Oh, right.
reform,
I've heard that.
Because she.
Carol, not in reform, to say the least.
Yeah,
but-
black man,
Mhm.
who said
Mhm.
Shiva.
Well, they
But
used to
then the
fit Shiva
grandchildren
into-
came along and he
Like
was
the dad.
proud as hell. you
Oh.
know.
Well, yeah.
They used to sit Shiva years ago if you went with somebody non-Jewish.
Yeah,
exactly.
I mean, it was that serious.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
You know, oh, you're going.
Thank God they don't do that
I
anymore.
said, he's only half Jewish. No, not good enough.
Exactly.
Not good
Oh,
enough.
my nose is good.
Not acceptable. Yeah. Yeah. Can I just go with
recommend
the
it.
half?
Yeah.
I like him a lot.
I think his name right.
And
I felt-
endorse it.
When the plastic guy came in to do my nose 2 weeks ago now, and I got his name wrong. So I said, oh, Dr. O'Brien, it's good to see you. He said, no, I'm Dr. O'Hare. I said, oh, crap.
Uh-oh.
Oh, that was gonna operate on me.
Uh-oh.
Oh,
You said that afterwards.
No, before.
Uh-oh.
Ah.
I'll tell you a funny story, and then we'll end with this about, you mentioned like exorcism, it's almost like exorcism you're talking about there. I don't know. But anyway, Phoenix was exorcised, and so they sat Shiva.
Maybe.
There was a family, I got a call up north, from this family who just moved into the new home. They're not Jewish. And I said, we need your help, Rabbi. I said, well, how can I help you? And they said, well, we just moved into our new home. And since the day we've moved in, only terrible and bad things have happened to us. Can you come and do an exorcism of our home to get rid of the evil spirits in our house? So I asked them, could you tell me a little bit more? So they said, well, Rabbi, we are Catholic and we call the local Catholic church, and there's a rite of exorcism in the church for houses and things, people, whatever. So it's sort of like one of these movies, this priest came with a little black bag in the middle of the night and did the rite of exorcism, and then things got only worse. And I know this is gonna sound like a joke, but it's not a joke. And so they then called the Episcopal Church up in Kings Park, and the Episcopal minister came, priest, and did the Episcopal rite of exorcism, and things got even more worse with illness, and they were losing their finances, and just everything horrible was happening to them in this new home. And then they remembered that the previous owners were Jewish, and they saw the invitation for mezuzah. So they asked me to come over and put a mezuzah up and bless the home. So I said, sure. So I went up, so I went up there, blessed the home, and everything turned out well and fine.
Oh, my God.
Yeah.
Did they convert to
Truth is
Judaism?
Right? And I didn't bring a little black bag.
I want to know if they made a donation to your discretionary fund.
Well,
We have a new marketing tool.
well, there was another family, they called me the Blessed Elderly Jewish family. And I got there and did put mezuzah and all of that. And I left and they gave me a check as a donation to the temple. I said, thank you. Well, that time we had a president of the temple that if someone's check bounced, he cursed them out like crazy, okay? So it turns out to be that their check bounced. Now, I didn't call them. No one from the temple called them yet about the check bounce and all that stuff. So help me. The next day, I get a call from them and said, Rabbi, can you come back? I was sorry, we bounced the check to you. We'll give you cash.
That's something.
And on that note,
Oh.
on that note, thank you, Ed Kahn, for joining us.
Thank you, Ed.
And thank you.
And next week and last week.
Thank you, Rabbi.
You want to read. Next week, we'll talk more. I'll talk more about God in our lives, as well as I will take you through the prayer book to understand the Jewish prayer service.
Okay.
So service.
Right?
When? Oh, tomorrow's 10:30.